Hello and welcome to another broadcast of Comics Let's Talk, comic book creators who passed away in 2017. We're approaching the end of this year, and I'd like to look at those comic book creators who touched our lives in the world of entertainment like no others could. Before we begin our tribute, I want to remind you to check out my comic book reviews on the Comics for Sinners website. If you love comics, please subscribe to my channel and stay informed with these broadcasts on your favorite comic book characters and creators. I have a column on the Comics for Sinners website. It's called Given to Me, which I usually use to discuss my creation of Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter and the making of the major motion picture, which is being produced right now by Crisp Filmworks out of Lakeland, Florida. If you're interested, please check out the pages Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter on Facebook, as well as Last Rites, The Return of Sebastian Vasilis. If you like what you see, click like and you'll keep informed on the production of the movie and everything else pertaining to Carl Vincent, upcoming novels, comic books, and the like. You can find all things Carl Vincent on Amazon, Kindle, Drive-Thru Comics, and Indie Planet. You can look inside the books when you look at the novels, and there are some free comic books, both on Indie Planet and Drive-Thru Comics. Check it out. You may like it. If you don't, it was free. What do you got to lose? And now let's look at comic book creators who have passed on in 2017. First, we come to Len Wein. Now, we already looked at his legacy earlier this year. He got his own show the same week that he passed on. He was the creator of the Wolverine, New X-Men, and Swamp Thing. And he passed on in October. Again, check out the show to get a full view of his legacy in the world of comic books. Number 2, we come to Dick Lochrer. He started as an assistant to Rick Yeager on the Buck Rogers comic strip. In 1957, Chester Gould recruited him for the Dick Tracy series. He would work on that strip until 1961 and then leave to do some military service. Chester Gould would recommend Locher for the position of editorial cartoonist for the Chicago Tribune. In 1983, Locher returned to Dick Tracy, where he would remain until 2011.
32 years of writing and drawing Dick Tracy was a real kick. We had a good ride. We dodged some bullets, and we dodged the bad guy and caught him.
In 2006, he was inducted to the Oklahoma Cartoonists Hall of Fame. He would live to see various publishers bring Dick Tracy to comics, starting in 1936 with Dell, then Harvey, and also Blackthorn Publishing, to name a few. He would see his character appear in films starting in 1937, starring Ralph Byrd, who did several movie serials and movies. RKO Pictures did some Dick Tracy movies too. At first they hired Morgan Conway for 2 films, but after that Ralph Byrd would return to the series, for which he is predominantly known. He was the primary Dick Tracy throughout the 1930s to the 1950s. In the 1950s, he did a TV series for about 48 episodes. The producers of Batman tried to bring Dick Tracy back to TV, with Ray McDonald in the role in 1967. A pilot was produced, but the show did not get picked up.
Dick Tracy, he's a good cop.
Dick Tracy, he's a good cop.
Finally, in 1990, Lochrer saw the last big-screen Dick Tracy movie with Warren Beatty as the iconic character.
Pat, Sam, come in. This is Tracy. I followed her to the Club Ritz. It looks like we got every hood in town in one room. Pruneface, Flat Top, Johnny Ram.
Those guys hate each other.
The film didn't meet Touchstone Films' expectations. There wouldn't be a sequel. But it's fun to watch stars like Paul Sorvino and Dustin Hoffman as Chester Gould's over-the-top villains in a film that could finally bring their campy appearances to life. And Al Pacino chews the scenery like he always does as Big Boy Caprice. Dick Locher, who helped bring all these characters to life, passed on August 6th of Parkinson's disease. The number 3 comic book icon that passed on this year was Flo Steinberg. Flo was one of the original Marvel bullpen that helped the company go from a two-person staff to the pop culture phenomenon it became. She was also instrumental in public relations as a meet and greet person and made sure that all the artists, who were actually freelancers and not employed by Marvel at that time, got their work done and complete on time. She was featured in the What If story that saw the original Marvel bullpen as the Fantastic Four. Flo left Marvel in 1968 to move on to bigger and better things. In 1975, she published one of the first independent comic books, The Underground Big Apple Comics. Mark Millar paid homage to Flo in The Ultimate Fantastic Four, number 28. Flo Steinberg passed on July 23rd due to complications from brain aneurysm and lung cancer. Marvel remembered one of their original founders as always been the heart of Marvel and a legend in her own right. At number 4, we come to Sam Glanzman. He is best known for his Carlton Comics series Hercules, about the mythological Greek demigod. Also, his autobiographical war stories about military service, which were inspired by his own tours of duty, were anthologized for DC and Marvel war comics. Then Charlton Comics' Fightin' Army feature, The Lonely War of Willie Schultz, a Vietnam War era serial about a German-American U.S. Army captain. Glanzman would pass on July 12th at the age of 92. At number 5, we come to Joan Lee. We lost the wife of iconic storyteller and all things Marvel's Stan Lee. Lee credits Joan with inspiring him to stay in the comic book business. Without Joan Lee, we might not have had the innovative characters that Marvel Comics gave us. When he was depressed about the job, she told him to create one comic he would be proud of. That comic would be the Fantastic Four, Marvel's flagship. Joan would go on to do voice work for several animated Marvel shows such as Fantastic Four, Iron Man, and Spider-Man. She also made appearances in several documentaries about comic books and had a cameo in X-Men Apocalypse. She passed on July 6th after complications from a stroke. She and Stan were married for more than 70 years. At number 6, we come to a really tragic story. When we discuss icons who have passed on because it's their time and they have led a good, long life, it's still sad to see them go, but it's not unexpected. However, there were several this year who passed, sadly, long before their time. We now come to a comic book creator who passed on way too soon, Tommy Castillo. Castillo started drawing professionally in 1996, working for Blackout Comics. His first published work for DC Comics was in the Batman 80-page Giant. Later, he worked on titles like Detective Comics, Batman Gotham Knights, Green Arrow, and others.
Most people go to a job and even though they see the guy they hate, and that girl that won't give them the time of day, at least they see people. We as artists, we could spend days, weeks, sit in front of a painting, sit in front of a drawing, and just forgetting that there's the rest of the world. Conventions bring it all to us, at least our little part.
Castillo passed on June 23rd. Due to kidney failure. He was only 46 years old. At number 7, we come to Jim Galton, who was the CEO of Marvel Entertainment Group. He is considered to be the savior of Marvel Comics and preventing them from going into bankruptcy during the 1970s. Galton would ignore the newsstand model and began selling directly to the comic shops. Galton also started an animation company out in Los Angeles, which helped lift the company out of its woes. He also was instrumental in getting Marvel the rights to do Star Wars as a comic book adaptation. He passed on June 12th at the age of 92. At number 8, we come to Rich Buckler, and we also have an independent show on Rich Buckler that we did a few weeks ago. You can go back and look at that on YouTube. We looked at his career in depth. The creator of Deathlock passed on May 19th due to complications from cancer. At number 9, we come to Joe Harris. He, together with Chet Stover and W. Watts Biggers, co-founded Total Television in 1959, which produced Saturday morning animated fare. He's best known to comics fans as the creator of Underdog.
When criminals in this world appear and break the laws they should fear and frighten all who see or hear. The cry goes up both far and near for underdog, 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 underdog. Speed of lightning, roar of thunder, fighting all who plunder, underdog.
He also created Klondike Cat and Tennessee Tuxedo, among others, which also appeared in their own comic books. Joe Harris created the Trix Rabbit for Trix cereal in 1959 and coined the phrase,
Silly rabbit, tricks are for kids.
which is still in use for Trix advertising to this day. Talk about longevity. Harris passed on April 4th at the age of 89. At number 10, we come to Bernie Wrightson. Now, Bernie deserves his own show, and we're going to give it to him probably on the anniversary of his birthday later on next year. But for today, we'll nutshell his career. He was Len Wein's co-creator of Swamp Thing, and he got his start illustrating for Baltimore Sun. His influences included Frank Frazetta, Al Williamson, Al Dorn, Graham Ingalls, Jack Davis, and Howard Pyle. He met Frank Frazetta at a comic book convention, which convinced him to start doing his own stories. As we mentioned, he helped create Swamp Thing, which first appeared in House of Secrets, number 92 in 1971. In 1974, Wrightson would leave D.C. and go to work for Warren Publishing's magazine department. In 1975, he, along with artists Jeffrey Catherine Jones, Michael Kaluta, and Barry Windsor Smith, formed the Studio for comic book artists. In the 1981 film Heavy Metal, the Captain Stern segment was based on a Wrightson character. Then he did the comic book adaptation for the Stephen King movie Creepshow. He also did illustrations for Stephen King's Cycle of the Werewolf. He worked on IDW's Frankenstein, Alive, Alive, and he was honored with the National Cartoonists Society Award. He passed on March 18th at the age of 68 due to brain cancer. At number 11, we come to Dave Hunt. Dave began his career in 1972 as an inker at Marvel, working with the likes of Mike Esposito and Frank Giacoa, among others. He worked on titles like Spider-Man, Captain America, and Fantastic Four. In 1978, he went to DC Comics and worked with the likes of Kurt Swan, Kurt Schaeffenberger, and others on titles like Superboy Legion of Superheroes and Wonder Woman. Dave would pass on March 5th at the age of 74 due to cancer. At number 12, we come to Jay Lynch. Jay is an underground comic artist that gave us the likes of Bazooka Joe and the Bijou Funnies. With Skip Williamson, he gave us the Chicago Mirror, which lasted all of 3 issues. Bijou Funnies was inspired by Mad Magazine, and that, along with Zap, brought us the underground comics movement. He's probably best known for Nard and Pat comics. Nard is a bald, middle-aged man of conservative tendencies, and Patrick is his more hip, talking cat. Kitchen Sink Press put out a Nard and Pat comic in 1981. Then came Phoebe and the Pigeon People in 1979. Lynch passed on March 5th at the age of 72 due to complications from lung cancer. I'm going to do a quick mention to, and I hope I'm pronouncing this name right, Giorgios Gionis. He's a Greek artist. Now, he was not a comic book artist, but he used comic book art in Greece's pop art culture movement. This gave comic books exposure they would otherwise not have had, and he was 90 years old when he passed on February 13th. At number 14, we come to Dan Spiegel. In 1949, Spiegel drew the Hopalong Cassidy feature strip for syndicated newspapers. His first confirmed work for comics was a Wheaties ad that appeared in Walt Disney's Comics and Stories number 142 from the year 1952. His first story in comics was in an Annie Oakley comic called The Bushwhacker, Dell Comics Annie Oakley and Tag number 7 from June in 1956. He would continue to draw various westerns for Dell. His favorite was Maverick, since he got to meet the star James Garner. He then went to Gold Key Comics, where he worked on favorites like Lost in Space, Korak, Son of Tarzan, Brothers of the Spear, and others. After Gold Key folded in 1975, he went to DC and worked on such titles as Batman, The Unknown Soldier, Tomahawk, Jonah Hex, Black Hawk, and Teen Titans Spotlight. He drew every issue of Eclipse Comics' Crossfire. At Marvel, he would work on the Hollywood Superstars. Then he did Indiana Jones titles for Dark Horse Comics. His last known work was for Graphic Classics. Dan won an Ink Spot Award in 1983. Spiegel passed on January 28th at the age of 96. The number 15 comic creator that passed in 2017 was John Watkiss. John graduated from the Faculty of Arts and Architecture, Wrighton University, with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. He taught anatomy and fine art at the Royal College of Art. He worked on DC Comics' The Sandman, Starman, and all 13 issues of Deadman written by Bruce Jones. Then he worked on Ring of Roses and various Conan comics for Dark Horse. For Techno Comics, he drew John Jake's Mulcon Empire. His last known work was on Surgeon X with writer Sarah Kenny for Image Comics. Watkiss, tragically, also passed on way too soon on January 20th due to complications related to cancer. He was 55 years old. At number 16, we come to Jack Mendelsohn. Jack was an American writer-artist that worked in animation, comic strips, and comic books. An Emmy-nominated television comedy writer and story editor, he had numerous credits as a TV scripter, including Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, Three's Company, The Carol Burnett Show, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, of interest to comic book fans. Among his work for feature films, he was a co-screenwriter for the Beatles' Yellow Submarine in 1968. In 2004, the Animation Writers Caucus of the Writers Guild gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, while living in Mexico City, he wrote and drew his innovative comic strip, Jackie's Diary. It began January 11, 1959, continuing until 1961. The Sunday-only strip is regarded by many comics buffs as one of King Feature's most novel and clever humor strips. The strips were turned into comic books and trade novels by Dell and IDW Publishing. He was a contributor to EC Comics' Panic. In 2014, Mendelsohn received the Bill Finger Award. He would pass on January 25th, 2017, at the age of 90. At number 17, we come to Gerry Gersten. Gerry got his start drawing for the New York Times, New York, Sports Illustrated, Time, Newsweek, Rolling Stone, and Esquire magazines. He drew U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt shielding his eyes from the Holocaust on the cover of Arthur D. Morse's book, While 6 Million Died, in 1968. He got his start at Mad when the publishers printed a caricature of Ronald Reagan, which they used for the poem parody The Reagan, modeled after Edgar Allan Poe's poem, The Raven. After that, he submitted 39 illustrations for Mad magazine from 1986 until 2001. His awards include the Society of Illustrators, the Art Directors Club, and the Society of Publication Designers. His work can be seen at the Brooklyn Museum, the Spectrum Gallery, the Daz Marcel Gallery in New York City, several galleries in Connecticut, the Museum of American Illustration, and the Cornell Museum. Gerry Gersten passed on January 12th after a long battle with Parkinson's disease. Mad magazine paid tribute to him in issue number 545. He was 89 years old. Now, we didn't cover the manga artist this time around. We're going to do a separate broadcast later on in December on manga artists that have passed on in 2017. This is Kevin Given. Thanks for joining me at this look at comic book creators who passed on in 2017. I invite you to check out my comic book reviews on the Comics for Sinners website. If you like what you see, subscribe to my channel. If you love comic books, you're going to subscribe to my channel. And we're going to talk comics all day, all night long. Also check out my column Given to Me. I discuss my own creation, which is Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter. Go to Facebook and like the pages Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter and Last Rites, The Return of Sebastian Basilis to keep up on all things Carl Vincent related. And you can find all things novels, comic books, animation, all things Carl Vincent on Amazon, Kindle, Drive-Thru Comics, and Indie Planet. The major motion picture is in production now from Crisp Filmworks out of Lakeland, Florida. Once again, you can go to Indie Planet and Drive-Thru Comics and get free copies of Carl Vincent Vampire Comics digitally. Several copies are available for free. The current Carl Vincent story we're working on is Dracula Rising with Rodolfo Ezequiel, my brand new artist. I'm going to show you a few panels from his pages right here and now. And until next broadcast, this is Kevin Gibbons saying, keep reading those comics.